Outside the city of Chang'an during the Tang Dynasty, there was a beggar known as the Blind Monk. This blind monk had been blind since childhood, born into a poor family. His parents died in an epidemic when he was young, leaving him to survive on the charity of his neighbors and begging on the streets. Dressed in tattered clothes, the blind monk roamed the streets and alleys in search of food to survive. Despite the hardships, he remained steadfast in his faith in Buddha as compassion, often reciting Buddha's prayers and scriptures, filled with hope for the future. The blind monk often stayed outside the temple, having heard that the Buddha statue inside was highly revered, and many who prayed there received blessings. The head monk of the temple, seeing the blind monk as pitiful state, would often give him leftover food. Although he couldn't see the statue, the blind monk could feel the solemn and peaceful aura of the temple, which brought him immense inner peace. He frequently clasped his hands in prayer, softly chanting, Namo Amitabha, may Buddha as compassion guide me out of darkness and across the sea of suffering. Days turned into weeks, and the blind monk continued begging on the streets, enduring cold, hunger, and illness. Sometimes he overheard passers-by mocking him, saying, This blind man is just a beggar. His life is so miserable, yet he still believes in Buddha. Buddha must have abandoned him by now. Though these words saddened him, his faith never wavered. He firmly believed that Buddha would one day show him the way. One day, the blind monk fell ill. That year, a plague swept through Chang'an, and the people were terrified. Already frail, the blind monk could not withstand the epidemic. He lay weak on the street, shivering from the cold, with his breathing growing shallow. Passers-by hurried by without offering any help. In that moment, the blind monk could feel the shadow of death approaching. Yet even in such dire circumstances, his faith in Buddha remained unshaken. With a faint voice, he prayed, Merciful Buddha, if I can overcome this suffering, I vow to dedicate the rest of my life to serving others, freeing myself from selfish desires, spreading kindness, and alleviating the world's suffering. Just as the blind monk was about to give up, an elderly man with white hair suddenly appeared beside him. The old man was dressed simply, with a kind face. He gently knelt down and handed the blind monk a bowl of hot soup. Though the blind monk couldn't see him, he could feel the warmth spreading through his body. Surprised by the stranger's kindness, he gratefully said, Thank you, kind sir. Your compassion is boundless, and I have nothing to repay you with. The old man smiled and said, There is no need for thanks. In this world, good and evil are born from a single thought. Though you are in a difficult situation, your heart still holds on to kindness, and that is the greatest contribution to the world. Drink this soup, it will make you feel better. The blind monk, following the old man's words, slowly drank the hot soup, immediately feeling warmth return to his body, and his spirits lifted. The old man then helped him to his feet, speaking gently, I can only help you for a moment, but the light in your heart will guide you through the long darkness ahead. The blind monk, moved to tears, tightly held the old man's hand, saying, Are you a messenger sent by Buddha? I have always believed that Buddha would help me, and today I see that my faith was not in vain. The old man smiled and said, Buddha is everywhere, and his compassion never abandons anyone with a kind heart. If you truly believe in Buddha, you must understand that real salvation comes from within. Buddha teaches us to save ourselves and to save others. Enlightened by the old man's words, the blind monk bowed deeply and said, I understand now. The boundless Dharma teaches that all beings suffer. Only through self-cultivation and spreading kindness can we be truly saved. The old man nodded and said, Go now. From this day forward, not only should you pray for yourself, but you should also pray for those who suffer as you do. Repay the world with your acts of kindness. Though your eyes are blind, your heart can be bright. The blind monk followed the old man's advice. From that day on, he no longer just begged for survival but began actively helping those even worse off than himself, beggars and orphans alike. He shared what little he had, always striving to give to others. Even though he remained poor and blind, his heart grew more and more open. One day, the blind monk heard of an elderly man in Chang'an who was gravely ill and had no one to care for him. Exhausted, the blind monk walked a long distance to visit the man. As he approached the dilapidated house, he heard faint breathing inside. Entering the room, he found the elderly man lying on a bed, barely alive. The blind monk approached, speaking softly. "Elder, do not worry. I will take care of you and ensure that you are not alone in your final days." The elderly man slowly opened his eyes, weakly smiling as he said, "Young man, you're the one who helped me that day." The blind monk paused in surprise and then realized this was the same old man who had saved him. However, the man's strength had faded, and he was now frail. Feeling deep compassion, the blind monk knelt by his bed and respectfully said, "It's you. I haven't had the chance to properly thank you for saving my life, and now I am here to care for you." The elderly man smiled weakly and said, "Young man, there is no need to thank me. Buddha teaches us that every act of kindness is part of a cycle. The good you do for me today will come back to you tomorrow." The blind monk, with tears in his eyes, nodded and silently vowed to continue this cycle of kindness. He cared for the elderly man, cooking soup for him, cleaning his room, and tending to his needs every day. Though life remained tough, the blind monk's heart had never felt so full. A few months later, the elderly man passed away peacefully one morning. The blind monk made all the necessary arrangements for his funeral and prayed before the Buddha, hoping the old man would find peace. He thanked Buddha for the blessing of meeting this man. From then on, the blind monk continued his acts of kindness, not just to repay others but because he had come to deeply understand the compassion Buddha taught. The blind monk lived to an old age. Though he was blind and poor his entire life, he never complained about his fate. His acts of kindness inspired many, and over time, the people of the city began to refer to him as the blind monk Jushi. Whenever someone was in trouble, they would think of the old man who couldn't see but had the clearest heart. The blind monk's story spread throughout Chang'an, becoming a model of virtue for all. People came to understand that true light doesn't come from the eyes, but from the heart. True happiness doesn't come from how much you have, but from how much you help and warm others. As the blind monk often told those who sought his wisdom, if Buddha lives in your heart, what does it matter if your eyes cannot see? Only through good deeds can we escape the darkness of life and walk toward eternal light.